Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about cybersecurity. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, I'm learning web development, but my aspiration later on is to work in something related to cybersecurity. However, I'm not sure how similar those careers are. Should I keep learning web development because it will give me insights into cybersecurity, or should I be studying something completely different? Thank you. I would say that you should switch. So there are guys, just so you know, guys, like there are plenty of people who are just, the full education is just readily available for cybersecurity sort of work. And so this is one of those situations where I want to tell you this because this is the thing that is a little bit tricky with programming. In theory, as long as you're working with the computer, coding skills could be useful. So, I mean, if you think about it, like what in essence everybody who's working with a computer is doing is using a program in some way. So, knowledge of how to build software or like build your own custom tools or things like that could, in theory, be really useful. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of cybersecurity experts will sort of hopefully agree with me that yes, there are absolutely situations where knowledge of software development and web development and coding and all that stuff is very useful. But I think we can also agree that it's a little bit odd to look at that as the way to become a cybersecurity specialist, because even though there is use for coding, it is not the main thing about cybersecurity. For me as a web developer, like as a software developer, the coding is my focus. That's what the thing I have to put most of my emphasis on because I'm building systems practically all the time. But as a cybersecurity person or a pen tester or something like that, you have a very different set of tools. Like your if you think about it this way, like your whole deal is to, well, depending on what area now, but let's assume that you're doing web, like you're basically testing code that's oversimplifying it a lot, but you're in essence testing digital systems and trying to figure out exploits and like all these sorts of things. And there are exceptions to this rule. I know that there are tons, and I've said so to the subscriber as well, that there are specific areas within cybersecurity, because it's a pretty big area depending on what you're testing and like what you're trying to do, where real die-hard coding skills can be very useful. But as a fresh beginner and stuff like that, depending on what you're going to do, it might be completely irrelevant for you, because the tooling, like, I mean, I'm a hobby level cybersecurity developer, a cybersecurity person. Like, I do some capture the flag stuff and stuff like that. Nothing fancy whatsoever. And I can count on my 5 fingers how many times my knowledge of web development has helped me. It's usually not that is going to help. That's not something that is going to help me, in those sort of situations. And so I would say this: a little bit of Python or a little bit of JavaScript or something like that is a healthy complement to a cybersecurity background. But you should not treat web development as this interchangeable thing with cybersecurity. They are very different focuses. The tools are completely different on average, even though they're both dealing with software. A good analogy is, in my opinion, like it's like learning how to drive. So I mean, if you, depending on what you're going to do with your driver's license, if you're just going to drive for your own purposes versus being like a Formula One driver, like a NASCAR driver or a taxi driver, so forth, like there are different things you can use that exact skill for. It's the same thing here. Coding could, in theory, be useful to anybody who uses a computer, but I think that it's better for you to focus on the thing that is closest to what is basically reflected in the daily job as a cybersecurity specialist. And if that is your goal, then definitely drop like web development as your focus and start looking at that sort of work. The best complementary skill set that I can think of myself, you should go and ask real cybersecurity specialists on this, but like based on my knowledge at the very least and the little stuff that I do with it, is you're going to be much more well served by learning things about networking, like how to work with different networks of like computers and VMs and stuff like that, and like as a broader thing, operations and sysadmin work, because a lot of pen testing, depending on again what are you going to test, because there's so much. But if you're doing like web stuff and like these sorts of things, knowing how to exploit web APIs and test website and things like that, that's absolutely one part of it. But another thing is, if you get access to like VMs or things like that, do you actually know, say, the Windows operating system really well, so you understand how to, say, you do different exploits which has to do with the operating system. And the same thing goes for Linux, for example. Linux is a big thing, so if you don't really know the operating systems and things like that, that's something that can be really useful for you, not just for the sake of using that to exploit somebody else's computer or like some system somewhere, but also for your own sake, because a lot of the stuff that you need to do as like a cybersecurity analyst, like you have tools of your own, and some of them are like open source projects on GitHub. So knowing some stuff about Git and knowing how to run command line stuff and like do different operations in your various operating systems is a very useful thing. And when you get more advanced, you will know that quite a lot of if you're doing like pen testing for corporations and stuff like that, they all have different types of platforms and they have different like security measures in place and so forth. And learning things about those systems is, again, more useful for you, because if you understand how those systems work, then you can sort of figure out where the weaknesses usually are. So networking and sysadmin work as a complement to your cybersecurity focus or bug hunting or whatever you're doing is, I argue, a better way of focusing your time than going die hard in on web development. So what I want you to take away from this is that, yes, I would say that if your goal is to become a cybersecurity specialist or something like that, or a pen tester, unless you're doing something very specific, there are situations where die-hard coding skills like C and C++ and like these sorts of exploits are going to be like, you're getting closer to hardware stuff and so forth. That might be very useful for you, but in this situation, it seems that it's a question of web technologies. And although some understanding of how APIs work and how HTTP protocols and so forth work is very useful, I wouldn't go as far as to say that you should be a software developer, like a web developer, in order to then like be a cybersecurity specialist. I think that you should focus on that. There's tons of courses and content and influencers. I have my own favorites like that I follow, because I don't know a lot about cybersecurity apart from the basics that we software developers really need to know in order to build better software and stuff like that. And so I would say that if you know a little bit of Python, maybe some bash scripting or PowerShell depending on what OS you're using, and maybe a little bit of JavaScript tops, like you don't have to go die hard in on this until you have a really solid foundation. You can get pretty far without knowing a lot about coding. That's at least my opinion when it comes to cybersecurity. That's all I have to say on that. But if you are looking for it to complement your skill and sort of prepare to be a better cybersecurity specialist or something like that, I would say that learning sysadmin work, really knowing the Windows operating system and the Linux operating system, those are the two main operating systems usually you're dealing with when you're doing anything that has to do with mainstream, basically every single corporate network you will ever work with is going to have one of those two things. Usually it's Windows. And then looking at what the coursework that cybersecurity specialists usually go for and the certifications and licenses, put your effort on that. And once you feel like you have a sort of a basic understanding, because as I said, guys, there's a lot of tools that cybersecurity people can use that doesn't require them to know anything about coding. They need to understand as I said, networks and like how like the basics of a website and things like that. As I said, a sysadmin role or like a background in sysadmin is pretty useful. I would say more useful than being a die-hard web developer like myself, because like, trust me when I say this, at least from me, the little thing that I have done, I have never really felt that my knowledge of building like REST APIs or so forth and so forth, apart from the HTTP stuff, has been all that useful. My coding skills haven't really been the thing that has been useful to me. The thing that has been useful is my knowledge of the Linux operating system and all the commands and the command line and stuff like that, and then basically how a process and some knowledge about the Windows operating system and so forth. And the rest of it has just been things that are in the sphere of cybersecurity. Have a great day.